Folks, welcome back to the iHealth channel, the Fit and Fab channel, the Nutritious channel. We're going to go all over the place today. iHealth Radio, of course, with your host, Hurricane Age. New day, new show. A topic that is important that we need always to remind ourselves about, to talk about. The more we talk about, the more expertise we can bring to the table, the better we can all be. And that is a topic about health and aging. I mean, if we live long enough, we're aging, and if we age, we need to age healthier, live, a better life. And a lot of people sometimes may not get to a certain point in life where they have the vitality and the vibrance and so on and so forth. So with me today, I have someone who's going to guide us through a discussion about how do we still maintain our health and vitality and all the stuff as we do age. And we'll touch on nutrition, I guess fitness, the health piece of it. And again, my expert today, she's a doctor and she's an ICU nurse, professor of nursing, extensive training and research in anti-aging, health, fitness, wellness. She's a coach. I mean, she's a full package and she knows what she's talking about today. So with me, I have Christine Boev. Dr. Christine Boev, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Hopefully we can have a great conversation for your listeners and talk all things health, wellness, anti-aging, and hopefully I can provide some good advice and tips to help everybody live a great life.
Well, thank you. And really, it is a big deal. I mean, listen, if we're living, if you're breathing right now, watching, or we know someone that's alive, certainly we want them to be happy, right? And we do, live in this world, around people. The thing is, it. I mean, you worked at, I guess at the ICU. I mean, you get a lot of, difficult cases. I mean, the intensive care unit is not where someone wants to become or be. And yet, people there, I mean, obviously there's accident, there's this, that, but a lot of it is also disease and illness and lack of taking care of, self early on, whether through alcohol or lack of exercise or bad eating or, I mean, again, there's genetics, we can talk about all the medical piece of it, but it all affects us somehow, but we don't want to be there. We want to live happier. We want to live as long as, and I always make this analogy. There's two ways: we die young and we're just gone, or we live long and we got to stay healthier to maintain that life, right? And and that's the thing. At early on in our lives, we tend not to care as much, and I think that's our problem, right? I mean, we all think that we're invincible. We are young, we are vibrant, and life is gonna, just be as full of fun as we go. Listen, I get that from my own kids. I talk to them like, hey, you can't do this. Like, Dad, we're gonna live our life. Okay, but I know what's gonna happen in the future. You're gonna complain, and sometimes it may be too late. So let's talk about the whole thing. I mean, first of all, let's talk about your experience. I mean, just as in general, as a, I guess an ICU expert. I mean, that is not, I mean, I've seen people in the ICU and it's not fun. We've heard about stuff, we've seen them in the movies, but what is the experience that you can share with people? Because I think we start there, then the picture becomes a lot clearer for a lot of us.
Yeah. So I've been an ICU nurse for 22 years and I've seen it all. I've worked with infants through adults, and really the when it comes down to it, if you're not going to be in some sort of major accident, you're going to die from they call them the 4 killers. And they're all preventable, which is where my passion for health, wellness, and anti-aging really comes into play, because I see people, on their deathbed and they really don't need to be there. And so education is so important. So if you're going to end up in the ICU, it's going to be from heart disease, cancer, metabolic disease like diabetes and complications of diabetes, or your neurovascular diseases like Alzheimer's disease. Those are your 4 killers, and they are all preventable. And I think that's the big key for your listeners. There are very simple things that you can do right now to make sure that you don't end up in the ICU, apart from any sort of, like I said, catastrophic accidents, falls, and things like that. You see that a lot of times with our youth, like you were talking about, where you think you're invincible, nothing's ever going to get you. And, you make some bad decisions. You're under the influence of alcohol, you make some bad decisions. But for the most part, we do have a lot of control over our health span. And it's really powerful to have that knowledge and those strategies to keep you out of the hospital.
Well, thank you. Again, you mentioned the 4 key big ones, right? And as you said, they are preventable. And a lot of this stuff is, I would say, other than genetics, and even with genetics, you can still kind of work through them. I think the problem is more of behaviors and just, I
Mhm.
guess things that we pick up along the line. And frankly, um, those folks that are in the ICU, or at least, if you talk to them, they probably, will tell you that they've made some choices and maybe they were not prepared and they thought that things will get better. And sometimes one thing leads to the other and it gets a little too late. Now, obviously we can talk cancer and someone say, well, that's something else. But it'll, there is some I guess, conceived notions about cancer being something that we'll get through genetics and DNA and something even
Mhm.
diabetes and things. But really, there's a lot of factors that also add to the fact that you can get something. Now, of course, we can talk about it. People can tell, well, you guys talk all you want, but we've had this, we've had that. We know of people. I think everyone that's listening, watching, knows someone or will know someone, if not themselves, experiencing some sort of an illness themselves, and it's not fun. And early on, as we start our lives, I mean, the younger we are, I think the more we should be aware of what that looks like as we progress in life. The challenge that I think I see today more than ever, I mean, with the new age, with the modern technology and being in the games and just staying behind the screens, and the lifestyles
Mhm.
have shifted many, many, you know, uh, miles away from where we used to be as generations, right? And if we look at our grandparents and beyond, they were active people, and even I think you and I, we had probably a better childhood, playing more
Mhm.
outdoors than indoors, and by the way, that's not a challenge. Even for our generation, we have problems, and disease and illness, and a lot of people that are aging, are aging because they lived a certain period of time, and now it's happening. But can we reverse things? Can we prevent things? I think preventative is the key word here. We can, at least diminish the risks, and I think that's something that we can talk about more. But so doctor, what are some of the factors that really lead to those four elements that you mentioned that are completely detrimental, pretty much even fatal for life?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest one is obesity. And that's the one that I think we have the most control over is that we have got an epidemic of childhood obesity and adult obesity. And it really links back to two things, in my opinion. One is comfort. We gravitate towards comfort. We don't like putting ourselves in uncomfortable situations. We like convenience. We get Uber Eats. We don't like to move our bodies. And then the second thing is the way that we get our food and our food sources has changed dramatically. And the amount of processed foods that just cause our insulin to spike and we're shuttling fat into ourselves it's really a problem at this point. And so we've got to combat obesity. And I don't believe that we should, embrace big is beautiful because obesity is directly linked to cancer, especially breast cancers in particular. And so we've got to be really thoughtful about what how we're addressing obesity in our society, that when you are meeting with your primary care physician, that you're having those honest conversations about what is an acceptable, healthy body weight for you to be carrying around, because the more body weight, the more body fat that you're carrying, it stresses out your heart and it predisposes you to things like diabetes, which means that you're not going to live a long life. So those are all things that we've got to be really thoughtful about when we're trying to live a long, healthy life.
Also, you mentioned a couple of things. I mean, very loud ones.
Mm.
I mean, obesity, as we know, it's a pandemic on its own. I mean, it's real, it's happening. We cannot deny it. We see it, and I mean, maybe if you can define to people just what obesity, because again, maybe the visual that people have is someone that is, got a lot of fat and in their body, but what it is really from a medical, aspect of it, I think that just to clarify things for people, because here's the thing: we have charts and things based on your height, your age, and stuff. And it tells you,
Mhm.
like, if you're X amount of, pounds over, you're obese, but you're like, I don't look obese, but yet, according to the charts, you might be. So let's talk about just that technical piece, just to ease people's minds and understand what it is, because and I think what you said, the body. I mean, people want to live good and happy about who they are and how they look, but at the end of the day, are they really? Yeah, you could. I mean, psychologically speaking, you can just say, get all the positive stuff that you can continue pushing that you're healthy and stuff, but you know that deep inside, sometimes inside is not doing well. And by the way, you don't have to be obese to have these problems. I mean, we can have problems regardless, but it's just a higher risk, as you stated. So let's define a little bit that for our audiences, just to get them closer to the clinical picture of that.
Sure. So in the medical world, they still lean on body mass index as a measure of obesity. However, body mass index can be very misleading. So basically, it's a formula based on your height and your weight. But if you're somebody who's very muscular, so my husband, for example, he's very muscular. He's 225 pounds. He's 6 feet tall. He might technically, fall on the higher end in terms of a body mass index. So that's really not the best way to measure obesity. If you really want to measure how much fat you have in your body, then you can go into a radiologic clinic and do a DEXA scan. And that's going to be the gold standard that will tell you what percentage of your body is fat versus muscle. It'll also look at the density of your bones to make sure you don't have weak, brittle bones. The other thing that is very popular now, and we have in our clinic, is an in-body scanner. And all of my clients will hop on the in-body scanner once a month. And basically what it does, it's not invasive, and it sends a signal up and down your body, and it will measure what your percent body fat is, where your fat is. For women, a lot of times we store it in our midsection or our hips or our thighs. And so it really helps you to figure out like where the fat is and where the problem is. The other thing that you can do, which is super simple, is use a tape measure, and you can measure your waist circumference in inches and your hip circumference. And you really want that difference to be less than 80%. So you don't want your waist to be bigger than your hips. And if it is, that's a sign that you were more predisposed to heart disease. So there's lots of ways to define obesity. But for the most part, again, when you meet with your provider, you go for your annual physical, have an honest conversation about where you're at. There's also blood markers that you would want to look at. One of them is your hemoglobin A1C, and that's how stable your blood sugar is over time. That number really needs to be below 7% to make sure that you're not at risk for diabetes, which is highly correlated to obesity. So there's lots of numbers that'll really help us paint a picture of health and wellness related to obesity.
Thank you. And then the reason I'm asking is again, people think fat or someone who's just, getting big is, I mean, obviously that's maybe the obvious picture, but really it's the inside and how it all operates in terms of your body. And that can determine. And I love what you clarified that, the old model of the BMI stuff, it's misleading, as you said, because you could be muscular and look like, you're heavier than what, and by the way, I have the same problem. I mean, in the index, I'm actually obese.
Yeah.
Clearly I'm 5'8" and I'm supposed to be 170 and I'm 200. So it doesn't add up. Right. So, but in a way it does, there is something to it. You have to maintain, you have to control that. I love that there are other more advanced, pieces of technology that you can use to really determine where you are. And even the visual piece about just measuring can make a difference. Now we can also, just anyone watching, listening, if you can't breathe, you can't bend down to your laces, whatever things are difficult, you have a little bit of, you're breathing hard when you walk around. I mean, there's certain things that can still be, signs that you have a problem. And by the way, I work out. When I stop working out just a couple of weeks, you can feel some stuff. We can gain weight easily, and there's also an age factor there. Early on versus later on can make a difference. Your metabolism difference, and we can talk about hormones and things like that as well. So that's it. You mentioned the food that we eat. I mean, that is, I think, one of the biggest problems we have. Besides the behavior is the comfort that we live in today. I mean, everything is on an app. You just click and go. You don't even have to move from your seat, and food can be there. Soon we'll have even robots feeding you. I'm sorry, but I can see that happening. I mean, literally, it's amazing that we can have all these things, and technology is great to have, but with everything with moderation and understanding how it operates properly, you can do it. But we have all the means to really get lazier and lazier and lazier, and really that's what it is. You add to that the fact that our food sources, whether from the soil and what we eat and what we consume daily, I mean, I'm like, for the last couple of years since I started the radio, I'm like literally going crazy because I can tell you the truth is that I don't even know where to eat healthy anymore or what to eat healthy, because
Mhm.
no matter where you try, even you get the fruits and the vegetables and the right meats and everything, but you still don't know if it's really, are they really done the right way? Are they, raised the right way? Are they, are they pesticides on these things? I mean, are they
Mhm.
organic? Are they, and even with the organic, it's not necessarily always what they say. I mean, there's a lot of misleading labeling stuff out there. So it's hard to know. I mean, we become an expert in every single thing. You have to look at every single ingredient in these products that you buy, including just the regular standard stuff. Forget those people. I mean, when we go around just getting everything in a box or anything in a can, that's another problem. And then we also
Mhm.
eat outdoors. Like a lot of us, have behaviors where we work hard. I mean, society today is difficult. You got to work and you eat on the go. You don't digest properly. You also have the problem of purchasing stuff again that is just fast food. We know that's ultra processed stuff, not good for you. I mean, someone could say, well, it tastes good. Obviously, I mean, anything with sugar and salt will taste pretty good. Unfortunately,
Right.
that's how the play, right? But really, we have all these problems that are existing and they're real and they're not going anywhere. I mean, the only thing that we can do is to work around them and understand how to kind of move around these things, gracefully, and then add other things such as fitness and the right diets. And I'm not talking about dieting here, just losing weight diet. I mean, that's like a fix when you actually get to a point and you need to get back. But that's not the real fix. You got to treat the root cause, which is what we're discussing here. It's happening because of all these factors. So if you don't mind, that just let's talk about the elements that I just talked about right now, or almost reiterated things that you've already stated earlier.
Yeah, so I would say the first thing that makes a lot of sense is to eat seasonally. And so, strawberries, it's February and I'm in upstate New York. Like there's no strawberries growing around here. So eat very seasonably, and if you can eat locally, that makes a whole lot of sense. So utilize your farmers markets and your local farmers and things to get your food, know where your food comes from, and know how it's raised and how it's processed and things like that. Right now, it's citrus season. So we eat a lot of citrus fruit in my house in the winter because it's in season. So there's oranges and lemons and grapefruits and things like that, which is a great place to start. I always, when my kids were young, I used to teach them, have a lot of color on your plate. So you don't want everything to be tan, like chicken nuggets and French fries. Like you want to have richness and color. So red peppers and purple cabbage and things like that. When you think about organic, it's really important that you understand what is worth buying organic and what you probably can get away with not. And one of the things that is prevalent in our soil is glyphosate, which is a direct cause of cancer. We know this, yet we still use it. It's the active ingredient in Roundup, which is a pesticide, and it's everywhere in our foods. And we've really got to do the best that we can to avoid that. So if you've got like fruits and vegetables that have a lot of texture, like strawberry, cabbage, celery, things that don't have a peel, then you want to invest the extra money in buying organic. However, if you've got things like bananas, watermelon, avocados, like things that have like a hardy peel, you can probably get away with buying the regular, because organic, unfortunately, is expensive. And right now in this economy, with inflation as high as it is, everything is ridiculously expensive. So you've got to figure out like what makes sense with my budget to buy in order to, feed my family in a way that's healthy and sustainable. I avoid things with a barcode. If you've got packaged foods that have a barcode, I really try to avoid those as much as possible. And then as far as meats are concerned, I always buy organic, dairy, eggs, and meat. Mostly because they don't have the growth hormone, they don't have the pesticides. Typically, and you can see, like, is this a grass-fed cow or a pasture-raised cow? The meat is completely different than a commercially processed cow that's fed corn, right? Cows aren't meant to fed corn. Same thing with your seafood. You really want to get live, fresh seafood versus farmed seafood. If you've ever watched any documentaries on how they make farmed seafood, it's pretty nasty. Like salmon, again, they're not supposed to eat corn. That's why farm raised salmon is like that kind of like sad light pink color, where the sockeye is like a bright red. So figure out like what's worth it for you. But for me, dairy, meat, eggs, those are always going to be organic. And I can go to Costco and find things that are a lot more affordable than like going to my local grocery store to get those things.
Thank you. And again, you're touching on the choices of what we need to pick and understanding those elements, like what to look for specifically. I think that's the biggest thing. Again, these are the reasons why we have these shows, and there's people such as yourself going around talking about these things just to highlight, what needs to be done. I love what you said about the seasonality, of picking out the right food around, because technically, if you're going to eat something that is not in season, it's probably frozen and, from a different time.
Mhm.
It's been through the process before you got it, so it's not as fresh as. And anyone who's gone to a farm and bought stuff on the farm literally will know the difference between what, I don't care if it's potatoes, they will taste different. And uh anything from, I mean, apples to apples, literally. When you go to the farm, and I do like apple picking, in the season, and then you buy from the market stuff, I mean, you put two apples side by side, one's gonna, go crazy and bad quickly, and it's gonna have all these stains, and it's gonna, like, go stale bad.
Mhm.
And the other one's gonna stay fresh, and it's gonna eventually, it's gonna, go away, it's gonna die out, but it will not be the same. I've seen them side by side, and the taste is different, the texture is different, and it makes a big difference. Now, obviously, the cost is sometimes a difficult thing, because
Mhm.
that's what it is. However, that takes me to that discussion about us spending a lot of money going out and eating outdoors and stuff. That
Mhm.
costs more money. And I
Yeah.
want to tell just a message to people, you know, because I get the businesses, I have, a membership to the Restaurant Depot, and one of those large, it's even bigger than, that's where most of the restaurants, can get local. I mean, obviously there's better suppliers or bigger suppliers. But when you go to these things, I mean, the foods are standard. They come in pretty much from the same factories, whatever. And but there, there's things that when you go to a restaurant, that's where there's a good chance, if it's a local market restaurant or local place, it's gonna be, buying a lot of the stuff last minute from these locations. And the food there, it may not be as organic as you want. And so that's the other thing. You got to look as to where you can get your stuff. If you're gonna eat out, again, you're gonna know. I love what you said about the seafood or the fish in general. I mean, if
Mhm.
it's not fresh, if it's raised in a bucket, literally, or an
Mhm.
aquarium, and it's nasty. I mean, tilapia is one of the more common ones, and if you taste a
Mhm.
tilapia today, it's nasty, literally. And I don't mean to make people feel or think about it, but it's really tastes kind of like yucky. It's just, we
Love
one
it.
time we tested it, and it was like, oh my god, it was like, no, this is not it. And so I can tell you, like, now you can, if you live by anything, a port or whatever, they have actually fresh fish that comes in, early on afternoons in some of these, boats, and you can literally get it right off there, or you can go to the market and get them fresh. So there's different options, but not everybody has those luxuries. Depends where you're located. I mean, you said you have said New York,
Mhm.
you might have different, but you have the farms, so you have the advantage there. Some people in Jersey, they might have, or like, sometimes in more internal states, they might have more things. And again, the show is worldwide, so it depends on part of the world you're in. This could be
Mhm.
different. I mean, in the US, we just have a lot of these things. I mean, we're capitalists, 101. We're all about profit. And unfortunately, industries, they do what they do best. They want to generate more profits. They produce faster and bigger and meaner. And so
Mhm.
there is, as much as we have FDA approvals and stuff, that only, touches some of the surface. And, there's always that limit. You cannot go beyond this. And, as long as you're there, you're good. You pass the measures of the FDA, and that's all there is. That's really the truth, right? So we can't
Mhm.
hide that. It's not like we can sugarcoat around it. It is what it is. It's a fact. But we just need to be aware of exactly what that is for all of us watching and listening. And if you're in a place where it makes more sense, you can get access to fresh fish, go for it. To your point, how these animals are raised, and what they eat. Are they grass fed, as you said? Like, even, chickens,
Mhm.
or eggs. I mean, cage free doesn't mean necessarily that they're, range, free. So I guess
Right.
there's some differences. Even in, like, you're talking about barcode. I mean, it was funny. I mentioned this at a different show. I just learned that these codes, like 9 is organic, 8 is something else, and so on and so forth. But not everybody knows those things, right? I mean,
Mhm.
if I didn't listen to this particular show, I wouldn't have had that opportunity to learn that, right? I mean, it's not like we're active, like, well, what is this, what is that, and not everybody's doing that. And so that's a problem. Now, let's assume that someone does all that, and we find the right food, and we do this, which takes on, we cut a little bit from going out, and maybe, or even if we do, we'll find a better place to eat and things like that. So, that's maybe you get to a mom and pop shop, where you can get the cooking, home cooking, but you get to these box ready food that may not be the same. That's the other thing, right? So, again, you got to be
Mhm.
selective. And this is not anti-business, folks. You just, it's your health, right? You got to do like maybe once in a
Mhm.
blue moon you indulge, that's okay, but it's not the consistency. And if you're out there every day, eating outdoors every day, and that's one thing. Then we have also the quantities. What would you say about
Mm.
people eating? The quantities we eat today, at least in the states, are ridiculously, enormous, and the frequencies too.
Yeah, so I think a lot of it's habitual too. We have these habits that, after I get home from work at like 4 o'clock, I snack on something, or after I eat dinner before I go to bed. There's so many things that we do that are habitual. There are very small percentage of the population of the United States are actually hungry. Most of us are overfed. But when I work with clients, I do health and nutrition coaching. I have them initially track everything. I have them buy a food scale, cheap, $20 on Amazon, and we are measuring and tracking absolutely everything that they put into their mouth. And that allows you to really pay attention to what you're eating, the macronutrients, how much protein, how much fat, how much carbohydrates you're eating, how much fiber. And all of those things are so much more filling than the mindless snacking that we tend to do. So the other thing is you don't want to eat until you're like stuffed. I don't believe in this, like you have to clear your plate. I think that's nonsense. We have receptors in our stomach. If we keep stretching them and stretching them, our capacity to eat is going to be higher and higher. And that feeling of satiety is going to be further and further away. So I teach people, eat till you're about 80% full. Eat slowly, chew your food, swallow, like allow the enzymes in your mouth to do their job and to start the process of digestion. Put your fork down in between bites. Try not to eat while you're distracted with like screens or multitasking. And you'll realize like you actually don't need these huge quantities of food that we're used to putting in our bodies. It's really habitual. So there are some sensible things that you can do to reset your palate, to reset your satiation, and like to stop eating so much. We're very overfed.
It's a again, like I said, it's worldwide. So in the U.S. specifically, we
Mhm.
have this problem. In other areas, we
Yes.
may not have that. But
Right.
if you compare just Europe to us, there's a big difference in terms of even if you travel, the portions that you get. I mean, you're talking about macronutrients and the ideal portions, right? And here's one thing, and in other countries may be different. Some people have more of a lighter kind of portions. You get a little bit, and that's it. And it's just the way it is. And there's also, like
Mhm.
you said, about habitual stuff, how we eat. I mean, if you're snacking a bag of whatever chips that are not even food, and they taste good. I mean, we all
Yeah.
try to, all these things taste good, and once you get one, you can't finish, right? I mean, you can't stop. You just keep going, right?
Mhm.
Like that whole Pringles,
Yeah.
commercial. It's really true. I mean, once you start, you can't stop. They're almost addictive, and you keep going. And by the time you finish, when you look at the servings, you're like, oh my god, I just got 2,000 calories. Now
Right.
you ate 2,000 calories before even getting your meals for the day, and you don't need 2,000. Some of us depends on the body. You might not even need that much. Therefore, you're already like ahead of the game in your calorie counts. Now, just calories. Now, this is a debate that maybe you can enlighten us about more, because we hear about calorie in, calorie out. There's the
Mhm.
nutrition part, there's eating healthy, there's in the right portion. So there's a lot of talk out there, a lot of chatter about how or what works and what doesn't. I think
Mhm.
you can lighten up a little the burden on all of us by breaking it down. I mean, ultimately, you talked about the macronutrients, but the one thing, for example, carbohydrates, right? We hear all about sugars and pasta and rice and stuff.
Mhm.
Brown sugar versus white sugar. I mean, there's a lot of debate. Some people say the brown sugar is not as good as the white sugar, and vice versa. And that's the thing. Like right now, you don't even know where the source is. Who do I believe? I mean, frankly, sometimes that's where it gets to the point. Like everybody's got a story, and you flip on any social media, you'll hear one version here, and you get another one here. It's amazing. Like we can't even get now unless you do your work and you do diligence. It's a tough place to be. So, what do you say to that?
Yeah. I mean, that's why I'm on this podcast, is to really help people sift through all of the misinformation that's out there. If you need to lose weight, you have to be in a caloric deficit. You have to take in less than you burn. You just have to. It's just basic science. And one of the things that I always stress with my clients is you cannot outwork a bad diet. So if you eat that whole bag of chips and you're like, oh, I'll just go walk on the treadmill, you'll be walking for days in order to burn off those calories. But one of the things we've got to focus on is if we're trying to decrease body fat, which is what most of us need. Most of us need to decrease body fat and put on more lean muscle. Lean muscle is your anti-aging organ. The more muscle you have on your frame, the longer you will live unless something bad, like catastrophic, happens. And so we've got to think about, all right, for my, what is my goal weight based on my height? And it has to be reasonable. And then you calculate what the total amount of calories that you need. And then you calculate, okay, well, how much protein do I really need to take in? And it's always more than you think, because protein is essential if you're going to build muscle and burn fat. And then you have to think about carbohydrates. Carbohydrates have been villainized for years. Oh, they're so bad for us. Carbohydrates are your most important fuel source. If you are not eating carbohydrates, then you are going to walk around feeling like your tank is on empty. You're going to have very, very low energy. The difference is the type of carbohydrates that you're eating. You've got to eat carbohydrates from whole food sources, fruit, vegetables, starches. I'm a huge fan of rice. You want to have those starchy, good carbohydrates that come from the earth, not from a bag. And then you've got to keep your fats relatively low. You don't want to have a huge high fat diet, because for the most part, most of us are carrying around enough fat as it is. And so you want to start sensibly. You don't, if you ever are introduced to some diet that's like, oh, you've got to cut your calories to like 800 calories a day and you can't exercise, and it's not sustainable. You've got to figure out like what you can live with, not something that you're going to try for the next 30 days or 60 days, but like what is something that you can live with so that you can permanently change your life. Because one of the things that people don't realize is every time you like lose a bunch of weight and gain it back, you are destroying your metabolism. And the next time that you try to lose the weight again, it's going to be even harder. So we've got to stop this yo-yo dieting and all these programs that are just way too low calorie, way too not sustainable, because it's really, really harmful for us.
Well, thank you. I mean, you've touched on quite a bit there. One being, the lean muscle mass and proteins, right? I mean, because that's the other thing. Like again, and you're right. Calories have to be in. You got to burn them. That's the first source where the energy comes. And then if not, it's not the fat. Actually, it's really the muscle that gets in first, because it's lighter, and I guess that kind of works a different way, and that's how the body is. And so we need to, and as we grow older, the body, the muscles kind of diminish anyways by default. So you need to almost constantly build up more and more and more. I've had a lot of discussions. Plus, we talk about strength training a lot just to build the mass and keep the muscles, up, because eventually those will prevent, fall and, bone structure and all the stuff that's happening. Mm-hmm. But you're right. The diets are great. I mean, you talked about, fat and we need some fat in there, and we don't need a lot of fat, but, you have like keto diets, right? That's a big thing. All these diets, they do have to, there is a functionality, they work, but you said it, it's not consistent forever. I mean, you'll do the diet, but eventually, what is it going to be? 3 months, 4 months? You're going to give up, and you're right. Everything's going to like get all messed up, and then you got to restart again, and now your body's out of whack. Next thing you know, you can't catch up. And now you have to find another one, and it's not consistent. What you need is, as you said, is like finding the right, balance between the carbs, the fats, the actual lean meat and protein stuff. So you can get, and you said it, whole stuff, natural, that is, real. It's not fake food or extra like added sugars, which is, not good for you. And we can talk about sugars also. The natural stuff always works. And if you did it consistently, it's great. You said something that is very powerful for people to just keep it as a rule. It's very easy to gain weight. It's very hard to lose weight. Let's call it for what it is, right? You can gain weight in one day. You eat a few meals extra, and the next day you're going to gain a couple of pounds. But to drop those pounds, it will take a lot more days and a lot more exercise. And, so it's always going to be that way. So if you do it right, like people eat 4 or 5 times a day, is that even necessary? I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, there are schools of thought that say you could eat, a little here and there. Some people say, you get a nice breakfast and a nice meal, and that's it. That's what for the day. As long as it's got the right balances, as you said, there's some color in there, there's some meat there, some starches, and you get all the stuff, so your body can, knows what to burn, when to burn, how to do it. So
Yes.
how do we do that?
So I think it depends. If you're one of those people that you do better on 5 small meals a day versus 3 large meals a day, I don't really care how you do it. I will prescribe you, here's your calories, your fat, your proteins, your carbs, figure out how it would work for you and your lifestyle. I don't like to eat 5 times a day. It's just not comfortable for me. Same thing with like intermittent fasting. Some of my clients are like, well, what do you think about intermittent fasting? Well, if it helps you to meet your macronutrients and it helps you to stay in a caloric deficit, then go ahead. You should definitely try that. It doesn't matter to me the how, it's the what. And making sure that what you're putting in your body is exactly what your body needs. You also alluded to the concept of muscle loss as we get older. The fancy name for that is sarcopenia. And it's something we've really got to pay attention to. As you get older, if you do not incorporate strength and resistance training, you will lose muscle just by virtue of your chronologic age, which means that you are going to age more quickly and your decline will be quicker. So that's something we've really got to pay attention to, is making sure that we're not losing the amount of muscle on our frame, because the more muscle you have on your frame also strengthens your bones. And if you have a bad fall when you get older, the worst thing that can happen is to break a hip, break a leg. And so if you have more muscle on your frame, you're going to be able to do that. So when you think about like health span and high quality, muscle is absolutely everything.
Well, thank you. You mentioned something about the the metabolism, right? So that's a big one. Let's talk about that. Like how, I mean, just as simple as possible. How does that work? Because someone who's in the 20s is not the same as someone in the 30s or the 40s and up and up. But I mean, we're talking about anti-aging. We're talking about living a full lifespan, but in different stages, and not every stage is the same and equal. Very few people actually contain and maintain, a particular metabolism level or the hormones, functions. And even if we don't want, I mean, for example, menopause and menopause, I call it, the low T stuff for guys, and menopause. That's something you can't get away with. I mean, you can work around it, but these are some important pieces that we need to be aware of, because those, if we're not clear about them, we'll go out of whack. And we talked about the diabetes earlier, and I'd like to go back there as well when we finish this particular item.
Yeah, so let's talk about metabolism. A couple of like key principles when you're thinking about your metabolism in general. The first thing is your thyroid is your metabolic valve. If your thyroid is functioning well, then you're going to be optimizing your metabolism. So that's part of your yearly health screen, is to make sure that you've got a thyroid gland that's functioning the way that it should. The second thing is there's a calculation called your BMR, your basal metabolic rate. And that is the amount of calories you burn just at rest, just by existing. The more muscle you have on your frame, the higher the number of calories you're going to burn at rest. So when I'm working with clients and we're trying to decrease fat and increase muscle, what we're actually doing as we put more muscle on is we're making them more metabolically efficient. So you're burning more calories like in your sleep because you've got more muscle on your frame. That's key. So again, preventing the sarcopenia, the age-related muscle loss, will help you be more metabolic. Now, when you talk about hormones, that's a whole nother topic that I think people need to pay really close attention to. As you get older, if you're a male, your testosterone is going to naturally decline. Your growth hormone is going to naturally decline. You've got to talk to your provider about how do you want to deal with that? Do you just want to accept that as, okay, this is just what's going to happen to me? Or do you want to work with a provider to think about some hormone replacement therapy? For women, the same thing, paying attention to all of your female hormones. Are you perimenopausal? Are you heading towards menopause? Are you having symptoms of menopause? Paying attention to your estrogen, your estradiol, your FSH, LH, all of your female hormones, so that you know what's going on between your brain and the rest of your body, because those are going to have huge implications on your metabolism. And for me, like, I have no interest in dealing with menopausal symptoms. So when the time comes, I personally plan on optimizing my hormones so that I don't struggle and suffer with all of the age-related decline that goes along with menopause.
Also, someone can, claim, well, to optimize, the hormones, that means you have to input hormones, I guess, right? Or some
Mhm.
sort of therapy. Now, some people can be for or against. What are some of the, I guess, the ramifications one way or the other for people when they come to deciding on hormones?
So there's a lot of mixed literature out there, but I think the overwhelming accepted notion now is that hormone replacement is associated with anti-aging and longevity for all of your hormones, whether you're male or female. So whether you're a male and you're doing testosterone replacement therapy, or if you're a female doing estrogen replacement therapy. There was a study that was done a long time ago, the Women's Health Study, and it showed that women that were on hormone replacement therapy had a higher risk of cancers. But what people didn't realize, and now they do, is that sample of women were older. They were in their 70s. And so by virtue of just being older, your risk of all cancers goes up anyway. So it was a very flawed study. And people are now realizing, like, well, yeah, we probably shouldn't, withhold hormones from women because of a study that had a sample that was really, really old. And so there's much better science out there that's supporting, at the very least, exploring hormone replacement therapy, having those conversations with your providers to see if it makes sense for you.
All right. Well, thank you. I mean, again, because that's a big one, right? Like, people sometimes they don't want to have additional hormones because we've heard about it causes problems, cancer one being. So it just, at least to give people a little bit of an advice of where to go. And the best way, as always, we say, check with your provider, make sure you do your research, your due diligence, and then you make those informed decisions. Now, I earlier we talked about diabetes as one being the top, problems. And we talked during the nutrition discussion about, sugars and starches. Now, in the treatment of diabetes, one of the main medications is metformin. Now,
Mhm.
is it true that, now it is used for anti-aging? Because I actually was told that by my provider that it is actually now being prescribed, and it helps people maintain, a better age, I guess, decline, if you want to call it that way, or age
Mhm.
improvement.
Yeah, so metformin has shown to have some really interesting anti-aging properties, and it's definitely something you should talk to your provider about. Because it's the way that it helps you to metabolize glucose better. Me personally, I'm not on metformin. I don't need it right now. I'm able to optimize my metabolism and my metabolic health through exercise and nutrition. But it's definitely something to think about. The studies are still ongoing, and some of the biggest anti-aging specialists in the world are taking metformin because it has shown to expand your lifespan. And so I think, and there's not a lot of side effects. There's not a lot of down to it. It's a very inexpensive medication. And so again, it's definitely worth a conversation with your provider to understand if, like, maybe that makes sense for you or not.
Right. So you talked about how you choose, like with exercise and everything. So let's talk about the type of exercise that we need to give advice, to people with, because a lot of people do aerobics and cardio, and really that's where it stands. And you go into a treadmill and the treadmill, and you run,
Mhm.
hours, 2 hours, whatever. Maybe do some Zumba. That's all good. I mean, by the way, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you can get a little fun and you burn some calories. But you talked earlier about building the muscle. So what kind of, I guess, formula methodology of workout that you advise people to really build and maintain a better health?
So this was where the big shift in my health and wellness occurred. I was a big cardio junkie. I like to do the high intensity, sweat till and like get out of breath and all of that stuff. And nothing ever really changed inside of my body. Like, I never lost any weight. I was still kind of the same. And so I embarked on my own journey of really understanding health and wellness. And it was when I really started to incorporate strength training on a daily basis that my body shifted. So I was at like 25% body fat for the longest time. and I was doing cardio and I was like doing all the things that I thought was right. And when I finally worked with a coach and he's like, Christine, you've got to stop all of this cardio. It's ridiculous. And he put me on a strength training program where I was lifting heavy 6 days a week. That's when my body changed. And my body fat has been at 15% now for several years. I like resistance training. So I typically do a 3-day cycle where I do, chest and arms one day, I'll do shoulder and back the next, and then I do lower body, and then I repeat that cycle. So 3 days, 3 days, and then usually Sundays is a rest day. I'm actually going to go to yoga later today instead of lifting. And what I have found, and especially with women, men tend to have figured this out earlier that like, yeah, I should probably lift weights. That's the right thing. Women, we tend to love the Stairmaster and the elliptical and all that stuff, and it made no difference in our health. Once you start picking up the weights and doing the correct amount of repetitions and sets in the right order, that's where all the magic happens. And that's where you're replacing that body fat with lean muscle. You're not going to turn into a bodybuilder. You are just going to put more nice, long, lean muscle on your frame, which is going to make you metabolic. It's going to make you live longer and healthier, and you're going to look better, which is really important too.
Well, that's thank you for clarifying it, because I think one of the biggest thing is that, if I put, use weights, I'm going to become, manly or big and bulky. I'm not going to one of those, competitions, right? Bodybuilders competitions. So a lot of people shy away from that. And I just want to be, feminine and, look sexy, whatever the expression that you hear. But really, you think that's been a standard formula. You want to be, on that aspect, and your cardio is good. Now, obviously, we want a good cardio, but you're right. When you put, you put in weight, it does take a big thing. I mean, it's a lot of work that's being done in your body to actually build that muscle, and you're burning, that fat as well. So it's just a different way, but it hasn't been promoted over years. Today, I think there's more discussion about this than I mean, I've been in gyms pretty much all my life, and more recently, I'm hearing more about these type of discussions, especially when it comes to like, strength training and resistance training versus like, we've heard about, I mean, obviously HIIT training and cardio and stuff and building. Aerobics has been there forever. So, but really this is the new thing. And you clarifying this for a lot of folks, especially our women listening right now, you open their eyes differently to like, hey, you can still do this without having to really look, that big. You can look great, in a better shape, and definitely look leaner and meaner. So go ahead.
I was just going to say too, it's not that cardio is bad, but we don't always have a lot of time. We're not going to spend an hour and a half in the gym. So if you've got 45 minutes and you have a choice between doing cardio or lifting weights, you're going to choose the weightlifting. And then I will add on like a low intensity walk where my heart rate is, not super high, like maybe 120s ish. I can carry on a conversation with you while I'm walking, but I'm not like totally out of breath. That's a nice sweet spot also in terms of trying to burn fat. It's just a nice, they call it zone 2 in terms of your heart rate, zone 2 heart work training, a nice brisk walk, a stationary bike, like something where you're not like dying at the end of it, but you're always going to choose to pick up the weights versus stepping on the treadmill if that's how much time that you have.
Everybody has that access. I mean, and you don't need a lot. You can get a couple of weights home, right? I mean, that's the other thing. Like people think like I need super machines.
Right.
You don't need that. Resistant bands, stuff like that can do the trick. I mean, even body work. I mean, you push-ups and things like that can make a difference as well. So there's a few things. I mean, do you recommend these things? Because someone says, well, I can't go to membership, at the gym, too expensive. I mean, although there's gyms that are like literally $10, and I'm talking about like, national, I'm not talking about some corner, gym, but you have those, for like, $1 in and you're like $10 or $15 a month, you can join one of those, big bucks gyms. So it's there and they have all the machines, and that's the other thing. Do you consider, working with machines versus free weights? Does that make a difference or doesn't matter?
Yeah, I like to do both, but if I have a new client who's like, I just want to work out in my basement, then I'll say, all right, I need you to buy 2 pair of dumbbell. That's it. you can get an amazing workout with 2 pair of dumbbell. I usually like if you're a female, maybe like a 10 pound and a 20 pound. But when I'm at so I have a home gym and I also belong to a gym. If I like on leg day, I like to go to the gym because I lift really heavy. And then I like to do a nice combination of free weights and machines. If I'm home, I'm usually doing just free weights because it engages your core a little bit more. We haven't talked about balance, but balance and mobility work is also really important when you're thinking about longevity. So free weights incorporates a little bit more of that balance and core work, but you do not need any sophisticated gym equipment to get a really good workout. And as you said, body weight is amazing. Some of the hardest workouts that I can put together are body weight. You can do burpees and all sorts of things that are particularly difficult and get a great workout.
All right. So now let's transit to the supplement world. I mean, we talk nutrition, but are we getting all the nutrients that we need? I mean, besides the proteins and things that that we need, the carbs, but there is minerals and vitamins and things like that may be lacking. And I've read a study that said that we need about over 60 plus vitamins and so on and so forth, and we're not getting half of that in our daily intake. What do you say to that one? And is there a way to actually, kind of circumvent that?
So I'm actually a big fan of supplements. I take quite a few, and that would probably be a whole separate podcast talking about supplements. But
I can do that.
If any listeners want to pick my brain about supplements, I'd happy to jump on a call and just help you through that process. But 90% of your diet needs to come from whole foods, right? Following a pattern of macronutrients. But it's impossible to get all of what we need from our food sources, especially the way that our food is made right now and regenerative soil issues and things like that. So a couple of things. If you don't know where to start, then I would think about a couple of things. Number one is you've got to have a post-workout protein supplement. Within 30 minutes of finishing my workout, I've got 20 grams of protein ready to go that I just drink quickly. And then it's in my body, it's in my muscle cells, trying to stimulate protein synthesis and help me build some muscle. So that's one thing. The other thing is just looking at your essential vitamins and, your multivitamins. So A, D, K, and E are your fat solubles that we need to get, typically from a supplement source. If you live in an area like I do where there's not a lot of sunshine, most people are deficient in vitamin D. You can get your vitamin D levels checked from a simple blood test, and it'll let you know like where you are and, what you need to do in terms of that. And then there's a lot of supplements for your cardiovascular health that, help to make your blood, for no better term, more slippery. So fish oils and krill oils and things like that to really help with that cardiovascular effect. And then there's a whole nother subset of supplements for your gut health and your immune health, starting with probiotics and moving through, I take a greens solution that I blend into water every day to really help populate my gut microbiome. So you can go really deep into the supplement world, but if you want to just start somewhere, having a good high quality protein source after your workout is going to be the most strategic to help you put on some more lean muscle.
Thank you. And you touch on microbiome and gut health. That's a big piece. A lot of stuff is happening. All your immune system is getting, a lot of action there. So would you just, expand a little bit on that and the importance of that, like the microbiome itself and the gut health?
Yeah. So your gut microbiome lives in your small intestine, and it's all of the little bacteria that you've got billions of them that live inside of us, and they keep our immune system in check. What's interesting is because of the food and the antibiotics in our food source, we have really damaged our gut microbiome. That's why it's so important to eat organic and to know where your meat comes from. Because if you're eating beef from a cow that was given antibiotics, then those antibiotics are in your system and you are altering the bacteria in your gut. So you don't want to do that. You want to keep it to a healthy place. So one of the things is to figure out, well, how do you feed your gut and how do you feed your microbiome and those bacteria what they want? And a lot of times that's where the greens come from that I drink every day. It's almost like fertilizer for your gut. Knock on wood, like I don't ever get sick. We've had like all sorts of illness. I work in a hospital, but I rarely get sick. And I think it's the attention that I pay to my gut microbiome to make sure that I'm feeding it well. I take a good probiotic every day, just to keep that area very healthy and intact, so that when I do come into contact with, different types of germs, and there's tons of them, that my body's like, yep, I got this. We're good. I can handle this, and I'm not somebody that douses hand sanitizer all over myself or wears a mask everywhere. Like, I believe in germ therapy. Like, okay, like, show me what you got. We'll deal with it.
You're doing old school, right?
I'm old school. Yeah.
But it works because the more you protect yourself, the immune system is not familiar with all the stuff, and therefore it's not ready. But if it's constantly bombarded, it's always live and ready. And I think that's just
right.
a way to, I guess, to look at it. And sometimes that works. A lot of people they just are exposed enough that they don't have. Same thing with allergies. If you're exposed enough to a certain element, you kind of lose that, right? So it makes a difference. Now, some people with the probiotic, I mean, would you recommend any particular supplement, or maybe like, yogurts and things like that, kefir or one of those drinks can make a difference?
So in my opinion, I think they all taste really bad. So that's why I don't do like kefir or sauerkraut and that kind of stuff. Like the good fermented foods, like you definitely have to acquire a taste for them, and you have to drink a lot of them. The other thing with yogurt, and I like yogurt, I eat a lot of like non-fat Greek yogurt, but if you put sugar in the yogurt, it kills the good bacteria. So it kind of wipes all of that out in the process. So, I think it's to each their own. People like to get stuff naturally. That's great if you enjoy it and that works for you. For me, I have found a probiotic that I like. I take it every day. It's very reliable. And, like I said, knock on wood, I very, very rarely get sick.
So that's a big note, in terms of like where people can go. I mean, there's a lot of supplements in supplement store, and some of it are just generic, some of it are good. There's a lot of online. Is there a preference? What should people look for to actually really, because you don't know. I mean, most of the supplements are not FDA approved. They just basically,
right.
Because they're not really. I guess I don't even know why, but every one of them that says label, this is not FDA, is not, it's just, there's different, I guess, measurements or requirements for supplements versus regular food. So where can people actually get, a better type of supplement if they're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the problem is you'll go to like Walmart and you'll see these, really cheap supplements, and they've got all sorts of fillers and additives and things in there, and you just don't know what you're getting because they're not regulated. So I've done a lot of homework in terms of like where the best supplements come from. And I use a company called First Form, the number one, First, PHORM, and they're out of St. Louis, Missouri. They have done the best in terms of quality control, making sure the ingredients are top notch. And so that's where I get everything except there's a couple that like they don't make. I get from there because you just don't know where things are coming from and what's in them. Like if you take a fish oil and you burp and you can taste the fish, that's a bad sign. Like you should not be able to do that. You want to make sure that they're coming from really high quality sources, which means you're probably going to pay a little bit more. But to me, it's worth it because they're a huge part of my goal to live a really long life.
Well, I'm listening to you, but isn't that sad that for everything that is good, you got to pay more? It's amazing how it's like you could. I mean, companies can make just as much money, but just giving better quality. But somehow that's not the case. You got to pay more to get the best of the best, and the average person cannot afford sometimes these things, and that's really what the problem is.
I could not agree more. So that's why, my strategy is always get as much as you can from your whole food sources, figure out where the holes are, and then we can plug up the holes with supplements. Like you don't have to take 1,000 supplements, but you do need to find like, what are the big ones that are going to give me the most bang for my buck? Meaning like, what is going to actually make me feel better? And for me, it's like that energetic feeling. Do I feel like when I wake up in the morning, like I'm ready to go, crush today? Or am I like dragging, just hoping to get like 20 more minutes of sleep? That's kind of my barometer in terms of like how I feel. And for the most part, like we can do a whole nother podcast someday on sleep. But for the most part, I wake up and I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go. Like, let's go.
I was going to ask about hydration and sleep. So,
Oh my gosh, I know. We could talk all day, right? Yeah,
well,
I
it's
mean, sleep
important.
is everything.
So we hear a lot of, different, I guess versions like 7 hours, 8 hours, you don't need much, 6 hours will do. I mean, there's there a particular number that we need to at least, be considering? Because that's the thing. It falls into time, and the best excuse,
Mhm.
everything we talked about today is time and money. I mean, really, that's what it is.
Right. Yeah, sleep is free, right? So I think it's more quality than quantity in terms of sleep. Like if you could get 6 hours of high quality, deep sleep circulating through REM sleep, then you're going to probably wake up and feel really, really good. If you're getting 8 hours of crappy sleep where you're waking up and you're, interrupted, then you're going to wake up feeling pretty crappy. So it's really quality over quantity. And I would say like free things that you can do to improve your sleep is turn your screens off 2 hours before you go to bed. Stop drinking so you're not getting up to use the bathroom in the middle of the night. Keep your room nice and dark and cool. Stay away from the LED lights. Like those are some basic things. Don't drink caffeine after 2-3 o'clock in the afternoon, because that stays in your system. And I would say altogether, just avoid alcohol. It's going to do nothing to help you with your sleep.
Well, that's a big one. A lot of people cannot live without that. Sadly, it's just, one thing. I mean, it's funny because throughout the pandemic, liquor stores were open, because that was
Mhm.
almost a necessary. So it's a challenging for a lot of people. I mean, you gotta have some fun, and I guess fun comes with some alcohol, and but it's not good for you because that's sugars and everything. And again, go back to the discussion that about diabetes and liver and all the other stuff that can happen.
Mhm.
Now, hydration. Just to close with that one.
Yep.
That's an important thing. I mean, obviously, I don't think people drink enough, and even when they do, I mean, I don't think they drink the proper liquids. I mean, water should be the one, but everything that if you go to a store right now and look at all these things that they have, it's all sugary, colorful, artificial stuff. And even talking about alcohol, I mean, it doesn't do any good for you. So what are some recommendations that can make someone do better? Because whether you're working out and stuff, you're gonna need some good water in you.
Yeah. So as a society, we're chronically dehydrated. We do not drink enough water. We drink too much caffeine. And now there are so many energy drinks out there that have diuretic effects that cause us to be dehydrated. So we're very, very dehydrated. You really want to consume, I usually drink a gallon of water a day, which I know is a lot. It's 128 ounces. I add electrolytes to my water so that I've got some sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium in my water. And then I'll flavor it up just a little bit. I would be cautious against any sort of artificial sweeteners in your water. But if you want to throw some lemons, some raspberries, like something in there just to like give it some flavor and it makes it more palatable, you can. The easy way to know that you've had enough to drink is your urine should be like a pale yellow color. If it's darker, then it means that you're dehydrated. And the downside of drinking a gallon of water a day is you are going to the bathroom every hour or two. And that's just, luckily our kidneys work well and they're flushing out our body, but you will look and feel better. Your skin will be better. Your blood pressure will be better if you are hydrated. So that is essential if you want to live a long, healthy life.
Thank you, and I want to highlight the fact that you mentioned the electrolytes, and yes, water alone can cause problems if you don't have those other things, because your balances are not going to be there. But you have to make sure you have all the potassium, all these things that you mentioned. Otherwise, it's going to be a problem. So thank you for highlighting that. Now, one last thing is just like inflammation. I mean, everybody somehow has some of it. What can we do can prevent it?
Yeah, so inflammation is directly tied to those four killers that we started with, like cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes, heart disease are diseases of inflammation. And so what the reason that we have so much inflammation is based on the foods that we eat and the things that we're exposed to in our environment. So, we eat something that's high in sugar, our blood sugar spikes, our insulin gets released, and our body becomes inflamed. So pay attention to the outward signs of how you feel when you're exposed to something. There's foods that are highly inflammatory, things that have high fructose corn syrup, alcohol, fried foods, seed oils, all of those things are highly inflammatory. You just want to avoid them as much as you can because those are linked to those 4 killers and we want to avoid those.
So I know we're exceeding the hour here, but just one more thing that you just touched a couple of times on, which is oils. You mentioned oils a couple of times. People use oils for food and a lot of it is bad out there. I mean, if you do the research, all the stuff that we cook with is really not good other than some olive oil maybe, and that is sometimes depends on the source. What do you state to that?
So any sort of your vegetable oils, seed oils, peanut oils, they are highly toxic. They cause inflammation. They get into your arteries and they cause damage of the endothelial lining. One of my favorite anti-aging gurus says he would rather smoke a cigarette than eat a French fry. That's how damaging those highly processed heated oils are. So I would say avoid them at all costs. They will cause plaque to build up inside your arteries, which causes cardiovascular disease. So I would definitely avoid those. Like you said, know where your olive oil is coming from. Things that are, say, extra virgin olive oil, like a good olive oil is actually like a green color, not a yellow color. So you've got to know where it comes from. And I feel like I've been all doom and gloom, right? But there are so many things that you can do, but you just need to know what to avoid.
Well, I don't think so. I think you just enlightening people. No, I appreciate how you say it. I mean, you're straight to the point because you see all the atrocities and the bad things that people go through, in their health, and it's not fun. I mean, I gotta give you credit. I mean, when you work in the ICU, you see a lot of bad things, and so you don't want to wind up that way. And I think I get it. I mean, like when you see like my mom is diabetic, and I see her struggling through it. I don't want to get that. And, that's kind of like how it is. So when you see a lot of disease and illness, and as you said, preventable potentially, why not do the right thing? And I think we all owe it to ourselves. By the way, it's not just for ourselves. I mean, if we have loved ones and society that we live in, we should just be good for that purpose as well, because we're going to do more for it. And if not, illness and disease may be good for some areas, but it's really a toll on society, on the tax payers, on a lot of stuff. I mean, there's all those things. So there's more to this concept, and there's also a mental aspect of it. I mean, we haven't even touched on that. If your health is bad, your mental state may not be as good either. So there's that as well. Well, I mean, yeah, I think you wanted to just add something there.
No, I again, the mental health epidemic worldwide is really devastating, and it's important that we acknowledge that too, and that it's a holistic approach to health and wellness, that the social, emotional, the spiritual, the physical, they're all interconnected. We can't separate them out. But if you are going to the gym and lifting weights and eating, your likelihood of being depressed or having poor mental health are a lot lower. So remember that they're all interconnected. And the last thing I'll say, as you alluded to, you are role modeling. Everybody who is around you is watching you. Your kids are watching you. Your friends are watching you. Like, show them how it's done. Explain to them why you're lifting weights, why you're drinking water, why you're abstaining from alcohol, because role modeling, like actions, speak so much louder than any conversation that we could have.
I was going to ask you for more advice, but I think you've covered it. So, Doctor, thank you so much for today's. It was worth waiting for, and definitely enlightening. And a lot of it is stuff that we might hear. But I think what you did, you kind of broke it down in all these compartments, and it's all simple and they're all connected, and they're not complex. Things to do. I mean, really, we can do them. I mean, anyone watching, listening, it doesn't have to cost. It doesn't have to be, time consuming. If you play it right, you can do it right. And your outcomes are going to be better. You'll live a happier life and healthier. I mean, if you're healthy, I mean, that's one thing. That and time you cannot really bring. If you lose those, it's over, right? So and time is important because you can do a lot more things. You can enjoy life better. So thank you so much for being with us today and for a great show and discussion. I truly appreciate it.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
All right. Well, there you go, folks. We come to the end of the show today. Hope you've learned a few things, and at least you have some guidance. I will have the link, to Doctor on the description of the show. So if someone wants to reach out, I'm sure she'll be more than happy to connect and give some advice, and we'll take it from there. That being said, I'm American H. We'll be talking soon. New day, new show, new topic. Bye for now.